as they go through it.
Yes, definitely. I'd like to take a moment now to introduce an executive from a well-known manufacturing company. He wishes to remain anonymous, but wants to talk very openly about the coaching that he went through and what he learned about himself. Tell me, if you would, about the coaching and what your experience was like. Did you start off with an idea that there was something in particular that you wanted to work on?
There was a few factors. Some was related to being relatively new in an organization that was built from the ground up and being able to influence coworkers and make changes. And also it was new exposure to the evaluations of employees and being able to utilize that information to build stronger relationship with direct reports and peers and somewhat executive levels too, and outside the immediate organization.
So you're being moved into a new leadership position then, right?
I'm relatively new into the organization in a high leadership position.
Mm-hmm. What did you learn in that process about yourself and the company?
The thing that I learned is I've always been successful in the past with moving forward. I tend to keep a very high altitude and I'm always progressing forward. In this organization, because it started from a small company, the high altitude didn't fit very well, and also the progression moving forward was challenged. So one of the things Caliper helped me with is how to slow down and make sure that people are following and I'm not dragging.
Let me make sure I understand that phrase, a high altitude. That's interesting. Is that a certain perspective that you had?
I'm very strategic.
Uh-huh.
And that's what I meant by high altitude. When I look at picture, I'm not knotted up, down low on what's happening and why things are happening that way and why we continue to do it that way. I'm more like, okay, strategically, how should we be doing it? And now the next step is, how do I get it from this spot to that spot?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, I know oftentimes, particularly as you're describing a family-owned business, which is smaller, although it's grown substantially over the past 2 decades, as you described, but sometimes reasons and processes for doing things sort of have a life of their own as opposed to being straightforward business decisions. Was the coaching to help you influence the culture and help to change the culture?
Some of it was related to that. Some of it was related to me personally changing so that I could better adapt in the existing environment. I had to slow down. Coaching to help me personally modify myself to better fit in with the organization. You have to modify yourself, but then you can't give up on your principal strengths. I mean, I'll be honest with you. On my direct reports, I went too fast for a lot of them, but actually I had a very strong organization. I mean, they liked my progression. Sometimes I went too fast for them, but they really felt my group was very tight aligned. My peers, on the other hand, there was a lack of understanding, and I definitely was having conflicts. A lot of them had been here for a long time, and they weren't as aligned with me as my direct reports.
That can often be the tricky part, because it can be easier to work with people who are reporting to you and who you're reporting to, but often those peer relationships can make or break relationships and make or break how effective you are inside of an organization. Can you describe for me maybe a specific conversation in which, through the coaching, you realized something about yourself and became more effective in terms of your behaviors?
We had quite a few conversations related to myself, not really caring that these peers were on board because it wasn't relative to what they were involved in. I handled the logistics and distribution. A peer that would be customer service, which is more order taking. Initiative that I had, and this is probably a good example, where we had to increase capacity in the distribution center, so we had a big project to realign the racks and purchase specialized equipment, and we increased capacity, 50%, which, we definitely needed. Back then, I didn't feel you really need to be involved. I'm handling the distribution. If it doesn't interrupt your operation, it'll just get better for you. I'll improve the services that you see coming out of my group, and in essence, you can take more orders and so on. so I didn't invite him to meetings about how to lay out the rack and so on. And this actually, because he's one of those homegrown guys, they've been here for 15 years, he felt ownership, and that's where it hit home with saying, hey, wait a second, there was no reason why I couldn't have included him in the project. What I did by not doing it, I alienated him and upset him and basically broke a relationship that didn't need to break. And then conflict starts from there.
Right, right. And particularly, as you said, your approach is you like to be at a high altitude, you like to be able to move quickly and make changes and implement them. So inside of this, a lot of it was realizing that the connections you make along the way, particularly with your peers, can make you more effective or less effective.
Exactly.
And were you able then to work through the broken relationship that you had here?
Absolutely. As I said, I had to make changes the way that I do things. I don't think I changed my principal way. I just changed the way that I'm doing it. I'm still a very focus-driven manager, but I changed the way I at least show that to the organization. It might be coming from a large organization to this small organizational adjustment that I never had to deal with the guy that started 15 years ago or the family relationship. But now I changed. I have to deal with that. I can't ignore that. I know I'm making the right decisions for the company and I'm bringing it to the directions that it needs to go.
Yeah.
But I can't just leave what was there behind. I have to bring that to be effective.
Excellent. And before we let you go, in terms of coaching, moving into this new executive position, this leadership position, how do you view coaching? Is it something that's ongoing that you feel is important to help you with your professional development, or is it something you look to from time to time depending upon what's going on?
Well, it's ongoing from the perspective that I always have to be aware of them and utilizing some of the skills that I've learned or the changes that I've made, make sure that I'm continuing. Because if I lose sight of that and start running fast ahead of people, I'm back to where I was. The coaching did start off very strong with some solid tools and some directions, and then it really migrated to more of a follow-up to ensure that things are on the right direction. We made the changes, we've worked them over a few months and made sure that we're on the right side. Now we've actually seen results from the changes.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your sharing that with us.
Thank you very much, Patrick.
I heard our speaker talking a lot about trust, and that is indeed something that you come into contact with when you begin executive coaching. The individual being coached is put into a very vulnerable position, as you mentioned earlier, Kim. So they're committing to 6 months or possibly even a year of working with someone who knows quite a bit about them and how they work with others. But I would think that once that trust is established, that relationship, as you said, becomes very deep. I'd think the person would want to check in with you at least periodically afterwards.
Absolutely. And when a coaching engagement comes to an end, basically there's a couple things that happen. We, at the end, sit down and review the individual development plan with that person and their manager. And then the coachee tells their story. This is what I've learned. These were my experiences and successes. And basically there's a little bit of a transition between the coach and someone inside the company, like a sponsor or a manager, that can take that development plan and help that person and support that person over the next 6 months to a year. And then the coach does check in periodically to see how that person's doing, or if they need more help. We're always there, one email or one phone call away. And what's interesting is I find that occasionally we get calls from our coachees just to say, hey, how you doing? Or, wow, I just got this great promotion. So they don't lose sight of the experience they've had, and it becomes something that typically is life-changing, and they can look back and say, wow, when I went through coaching, I learned so much, and now look where I am today.
Change, Kim, is never easy. Change is often something we avoid, go out of our way to try to avoid. And even when we want to change, often we'll fall back on old behaviors. What techniques do you use once you have a sense of some of the things that someone you're coaching needs to work on?
Well, as you mentioned, change is very difficult to make, and the sticking power of coaching is also challenging at times unless that person really wants to. What I find is those coachees that have pain are the ones that step up to change behavior. And what I mean by that is if their ability to not overcome some of their limitations will equal not being promoted, or not having the opportunity to take on a new project, a lot of times I find that the coachee is much more willing to change. Now, will they slip back? Yes. And it's funny, with some people, what we do is we'll take the 3 things or the 2 things they're working on, and we'll just post little reminders right on their desk. So when they start doing certain things, they can remind themselves either to stop and ask a question or to slow down a little bit and listen. And it's little things like that that keep it in check. Also, I find that if their manager is meeting with them quarterly after the coaching, or if they check in with me quarterly after the coaching, it's that little tiny reminder of, hey, how's it going? What you working on? Where have you been challenged? Where are you succeeding? It's that shot in the arm that they need to keep the change moving. And they'll admit it. Geez, I'm a human being. I fell off. I picked myself back up again. But I got it. I recognized it, Kim. I had it this time. And it was much quicker. Last time it took me 20 tries before I did it. This time I got it in 5 or 4. And that's kind of what it's all about.
Thank you so much, Kim. This has been very insightful, because now more than ever, leaders have to be looking at how they can be most successful during these tough times. And an executive coach, someone who can serve as a confidant and trusted advisor, who can be a sounding board and provide an objective viewpoint with solid insights, such an executive coach can go a long way toward improving our understanding of how we come across and how we can become much more effective leaders. People are looking to their leaders for guidance and confidence, so investing in executive coaching will not only make your leaders stronger, but as we heard from our guests, it will make our organizations stronger as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. The time has just disappeared, so unfortunately we won't be able to get to your questions. For everyone who sent in a question, we will be sure to answer them by the end of this week. Again, all registrants will receive an email with links to the recording and slides for today's presentation. More information on executive coaching is available on our website at www.caliperonline.com. That's www.caliperonline.com. Again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us at 609-524-1200 or email info@calipercorp.com. Thank you for attending today's session. We hope you've learned much and that you can join us again for our next webinar.